Tanzania has signed a big contract with the Russians. Congratulations to them. Giga Makofi, it's a massive project about uranium. Giga Makofi, yeah.
It didn't begin with Washington. It didn't begin with sanctions. It began with Tanzania, forging its own nuclear future with partners the West never expected. The news broke not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap that echoed across the globe. It was a Tuesday morning, a day like any other, until it wasn't. From Dar es Salaam, the official statement was released, concise and unyielding. Tanzania had entered into a strategic partnership with the Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation, Rosatom. The deal, valued at a staggering $1.2 billion, was for the development and mining of Tanzania's extensive uranium deposits. The world's news tickers flickered to life, the headlines stark and unbelievable. In an instant, the global energy landscape was redrawn. This was not a negotiation, it was a fact. For the Tanzanian people, the announcement was a moment of profound national pride. It was broadcast on state television and radio, the words resonating in homes, in markets, and on the streets. The deal promised jobs, infrastructure, and a new sense of purpose. It was a tangible sign that their nation was taking control of its own destiny. The news was met with celebrations, a powerful affirmation that the era of being dictated to was over. Tanzania was now the one making the headlines for all the right reasons. Uranium. The very word conjures images of immense power, of a force locked deep within the atom, capable of lighting up cities or unleashing unparalleled destruction. It is the Earth's hidden fire, an element forged in the heart of dying stars. In its raw, unassuming form, a dense, silvery white ore, it holds a latent energy 1,000,000 times greater than coal or oil. Tanzania's soil is rich with this potent element. The Mkuju River Project, in the Sealess Game Reserve, is one of the largest undeveloped uranium deposits in the world. For years, this wealth lay dormant, a subject of geological surveys and corporate speculation, but largely untouched. Mining this metal is complex and arduous. It begins with carving into the earth, blasting, hauling tons of rock to reach the veins. The rock is crushed, ground into a fine powder, and chemically leached to dissolve the uranium. What emerges is a bright yellow powder, yellow cake. Control the yellow cake, and you control the first critical link in the nuclear chain. This deal with Russia aims to shatter the neo-colonial model. It's not just digging ore, it's mastering technology, building processing plants, and capturing value at every stage. Transforming Tanzania from a mine into a hub of nuclear knowledge, so the fire in its earth finally warms its own people. Moscow's move into Tanzania is not a new chapter in history. It is the turning of a page back to a time when Russia, then the Soviet Union, stood as a powerful alternative to Western dominance. This is not the ideological crusade of communism versus capitalism. It is a pragmatic, hard-nosed pursuit of influence, resources, and strategic positioning. Moscow did not come with demands about governance or lectures on democracy. It came with an offer: technology, investment, a seat at the nuclear table. This partnership is built on a foundation of historical goodwill. Russia is not just a foreign investor. It is an old friend returning with a new offer: advanced nuclear technology, military hardware, and a permanent seat at the Security Council, ready to veto any punitive measures from the West. This is the currency of Russia's influence. It simultaneously denies that same resource to its Western rivals. It's a masterful move, a checkmate in a game the West didn't even realize was being played so seriously. A powerful ripple effect follows. Neighboring countries are watching closely, rich in resources, hungry for energy independence. The United States, Europe, long accustomed to privileged positions in Africa, are being outmaneuvered. Their slow, bureaucratic, and often conditional approaches cannot compete. Russia is not just building a mine in Tanzania, it is building a reputation as the go-to power for African development on Africa's terms. The news of Tanzania's deal with Russia did not just ripple through Washington, it crashed like a tidal wave against the walls of the White House. The reaction was not one of calm diplomatic concern. It was one of pure, unadulterated panic. They had been outplayed. President Trump saw the deal as a personal affront and a major strategic loss. His response was a mixture of fury and disbelief. The narrative pushed from Washington was clear. This was not a partnership. It was a hostile takeover. They portrayed Tanzania as a naive pawn, ignoring the clear agency and ambition of an African nation. For years, U.S. policy toward Africa had been a lethargic mix of counter-terrorism operations, humanitarian aid, and lecturing on governance. There was no coherent strategy for economic partnership. Consequently, the tools of American power were readied. Talk in Congress and think tanks turned to punitive measures. Sanctions against Tanzanian officials, threats to cut off development aid, pressure on IMF and World Bank. The standard playbook: isolate, punish, make an example. But these threats rang hollow. New partners waited with open arms and no such conditions. The West's favorite weapon was being neutralized. This reaction revealed a deep-seated insecurity at the heart of American power, the response of a fading empire, unable to adapt and unwilling to accept new powers. The $1.2 billion investment from Russia promised immediate transformative impact, a shockwave of prosperity radiating from the mines to the entire nation. The project itself would create thousands of high-skilled jobs and tens of thousands more in construction, logistics, and support services, directly tackling unemployment. New roads would be paved. Schools and hospitals would be built, not as acts of charity, but as necessary infrastructure to support a modern industrial workforce. This deal was a catalyst for national development, a true economic lion awakening on the East African plains, ready to claim its territory. With economic power comes geopolitical influence. The nation was no longer just another voice in the chorus of the developing world. They were no longer asking for a seat at the table. They had brought their own. Tanzania became a symbol of what is possible. It was a Pan-African victory, a demonstration that the continent's wealth could be a tool for its own empowerment. Ultimately, Tanzania's rise reshaped regional power dynamics. The nation was becoming a geopolitical center of gravity. Tanzania was becoming a force to be reckoned with, a rising power whose decisions would help shape the destiny of Africa and the future of the 21st century. To understand the magnitude of Tanzania's uranium deal, one must first walk through the long, dark shadows of history, a painful legacy etched into the very soil of East Africa. For centuries, this land was treated as a treasure chest for European empires. They cataloged the continent's wealth for extraction. Those riches were shipped away to enrich distant metropoles. African labor was forced. African labor was cheap. African labor was expendable. Therefore, Tanzania's uranium deal is a direct confrontation with this painful past, an act of historical defiance, a decision to break the cycle, demanding significant ownership, demanding technology transfer, demanding domestic industrialization, declaring resources will no longer be siphoned away. The colonial shadows manifest today as warnings, threats, and condescending lectures. This neo-colonial mindset is the final chain that Tanzania is shattering, transforming victimhood into empowerment, finally free from the long, cold shadows of its colonial past. This is not a story about electricity. It is not about turning on a light switch or powering a factory. This is a story about sovereignty in its purest, most undiluted form. When a nation is dependent on imported oil or foreign-owned power plants, its economy is forever held hostage. It becomes vulnerable to global price shocks, political blackmail, and the whims of distant markets. Energy sovereignty means breaking those chains of dependency. It means that Tanzania's industries will run on Tanzanian power, fueled by Tanzanian resources. The most profound aspect of energy sovereignty is not just the power to build, but the power to refuse. It is the power to say no. No to unfair deals. No to economic coercion. No to political intimidation. No longer can the United States or European nations use the threat of withholding aid or investment as a weapon. When a nation can power its own economy, it becomes less susceptible to that blackmail. This is the true meaning of the deal. Tanzania securing its energy, its voice, its will, and its right to say no. The news from Dar es Salaam detonated like a diplomatic bomb in the capitals of the West. The reaction was a frantic scramble. Emergency meetings were convened. Intelligence analysts worked through the night, trying to piece together how this audacious move had been orchestrated outside of their view. The fear was other African nations would see Tanzania's success, begin to question the value of their ties to Europe, leading to a continental drift away from the West's orbit. The diplomatic playbook was thrown open. but all the pages seemed outdated. They had lost. When diplomatic pressure fails, the iron fist of economic warfare is often the next tool unsheathed, freezing the assets of Tanzanian officials, restricting access to the global financial system, pressuring the IMF, pressuring the World Bank, a strategy designed to cripple a nation. However, the world has changed. Western sanctions no longer carry the same death sentence weight. In a multipolar world, there are other options. It proved Tanzania had made the right choice, exposing sanctions as a phantom of a dying era, a scarecrow in a field that no longer fears it. Tanzania's announcement was not a solitary roar in the wilderness. It was a shot heard across the entire African continent. In presidential palaces and bustling markets across 53 nations, the news was received as a continental victory. The signal was unambiguous and electrifying. It told leaders they need not accept exploitative status quos. If Tanzania could do it with uranium, could they do it with cobalt, coltan, bauxite, gold? Tanzania's deal was not just a signal, it was a detailed schematic, a blueprint for economic liberation. The second part of the blueprint was strategic diversification. Play the great powers against one another to secure the best outcome for their people. The third and most crucial element was insistence on value addition. This is the key to breaking the resource curse. The echoes of this deal are a call to arms. Tear up the old contracts, redraw the economic map, begin the collective work of building a new Africa powered by its own resources and governed by its own will. Beyond the grand theaters of geopolitics, the true meaning of this deal is found in the voices of the Tanzanian people. For a young geology graduate, it represents a chance to apply years of strenuous education in her own country, rather than seeking opportunities abroad. A local textile merchant speaks of the national pride she feels. Now, she says with a confident smile, the world sees them as a nation to be reckoned with, a business partner, an equal. However, the voices are not a monolith of unvarnished optimism. Village elders, who have seen foreign companies come and go, speak quietly of the need for vigilance. They voice concerns about the sacredness of the land, the potential impact on the sealess game reserve, urging a balance between progress and preservation. These are not conversations of fear, but of responsibility. The people are demanding transparency and accountability from their government and its Russian partners. The nation stands at a crossroads, and its people are walking forward with their eyes wide open, embracing the promise of a nuclear future while honoring the lessons of their past. The story of Tanzania's uranium deal is far more than the story of a single nation or a single metal. It is the story of a future being written in a new language, the language of African agency. We will see the rise of new South-South coalitions, bypassing the old centers of power to forge their own paths to technological advancement. The energy that will be unlocked is not just nuclear, it is the human energy of 60% of a continent under the age of 25, a generation that refuses to accept the limitations of the past. Africa's place in the 21st century is not on the periphery. It is at the center. The world is changing, and its new center of gravity is shifting south. This moment, therefore, is a point of no return. The old order has been irrevocably fractured. Tanzania did not just sign a deal, it lit a fuse. A fuse that runs across the entire continent, ready to detonate a future of unprecedented African prosperity, independence, and power. The atom has been split, and with it, the chains of the past. They said Africa must only supply raw materials. They said Africa could never control nuclear power. But Tanzania has spoken. The future has changed. A new story is being written, not by foreign hands and capitals, but by African hands, on African soil. It is the reclamation of the narrative, the seizure of the pen. This is not just uranium. This is Africa building its own atomic future. Political independence was only the first step. True freedom is economic freedom. It is the freedom from aid, the freedom from debt, and the freedom from the condescending gaze of those who believe they know what is best for you. Africa is no longer the prize in a game played by others. It is a player, a queen on the chessboard. The energy is rising from the ground, and it is electrifying the spirit of a continent. This is Insight Africa, where Africa's energy is power, and power is freedom.